Hey, thank you for joining me here. I'm in the gallery here in Mexico City. Oh, gosh, you could tell that we're in transition because there's art everywhere in the space. We've closed our show on July 1st and been working on condensing some things down so to make life a little bit easier. Who doesn't want that? But I'm super excited about this podcast. Adam David Bencomo is someone that I've worked with for approximately 3 years now. I was introduced to his work in 2020, into 2020, and I am fascinated by the way he depicts the human body and the lack of self-confidence and the bravado of it and the humor behind it is just amazing. And I have several of his pieces here in the gallery. We've shown him, I think, at least 3 or 4 times, and we're going to show him again in this exhibition. So I hope that you enjoy this interview. If you are a subscriber of the podcast, you'll hear this interview. But if you purchase our magazine, which comes out on July 22nd, 2023, you will actually get extra content because I do have an interview from 2021 when we spoke during the pandemic. So I'm going to add that in addition to our content for the people who purchase the magazine. So I hope to see you with a magazine, using the magazine as a guide to the interview for all the different interviews that we have. There's, gosh, how many artists do we have in it? I don't know. Every time I turn around, I end up adding, and we're up to 92 pages. So it's going to be a beautiful magazine with full spreads of images, a little bit of information about the artist, and then it will give you a connection to a library of video interviews so you can watch us instead of just listening to us. That's something that appeals to you. Go to artgallerystudios.com and you can purchase the magazine there on Blurb, and it'll be available on Amazon as well. So just look for Art Gallery Studios, Bureau of Queer Art, and there you go. It's there. If you're interested in applying, apply through artgallerystudios.com.
So many different things. I have like, I actually have like 5 exhibitions this month, so, or in June. Yeah.
Wow. The exhibitions.
So there's going to be one at Mass Art, one at a gallery called Area 405 here in Baltimore. Another one, let's see, in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside DC. Then there's one, where's this other one? Oh, I'm doing one at City Hall here in Baltimore. And I'm doing a gallery show at another gallery here in Baltimore. So it's just, they're all group shows, which is nice because, like, I had a solo show or a 2-person show in November, and that was a lot to get ready for. So basically, a lot of the work that I had already made, I can now just like place it in different places. So I am reproducing some new prints, but not as many as I did for that show.
Well, I mean, it's nice. It's nice when there's a library of things that you can sort of farm out, and then so you're not like frantically trying to, come up with an entirely new concept or something. You could
right.
There you are. That's great. But it's the life of an artist, right? I mean, you have all these shows going, and you have like 5 jobs, and one pays, one doesn't. It's like it's juggling all the time, and
right.
I mean, if all 5 of the shows sold and all the jobs paid well and everything, you'd be like, I'm going on vacation. But no, you have to wait to see when the crash comes.
Well, and also because like the job that pays the best is my bartending job. And this weekend we're having a turnabout drag show for the employees. It's the first time I've ever done drag, but like, I don't even know. Let me show you this real quick. I bought my dress is
that is very Mexico.
It is. It's from Jalisco, actually. So
very pretty.
So I'm very excited to kind of like dress up, but like from my roots that when I did ballet folklorico in high school and stuff. So I was like, wow, this is gonna be fun.
For the opening in 9 days, a week from the Saturday, our big summer queer show. We had a fashion designer last year who did a fashion show in the opening, Omar Amesqua, and all this. He does a lot for like Johnny Carmona and a lot of other drag queens here, as part of like I don't know what the show is called, Mas Draga, Mexico, like the RuPaul of Mexico. And
oh yeah.
so this designer is making me this kimono and this beautiful Mexican print, and then this beautiful black dress to go with it. So the only thing I can't seem to find is shoes. Like I have no idea what I'm going to wear for shoes. I'm like, I just can't wear like, like my regular shoes with it. I have to have something special. So
right.
I'm trying to figure out how to pull all this together and everything on top of production. And right now you can see we're in production.
That's amazing.
I saw your email pop up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be in Zoom right now. Ah!
Right. And then I'm like, oh, technology is like all over the place today too. So right. I mean, I am doing last minute things for this costume because like it doesn't fit completely and entirely, so I'm having to alter a little bit. And it's weird. I was just like, oh, I'm not that worried. And I was thinking, man, I have a lot of skills. I could just like whip out my sewing machine. I was like, what am I doing? I'm an artist. It is one of those realizations because there's a lot of times where you forget, like, I think as an artist, you feel like sometimes you fall out of it and you're like, I'm not an artist. Like, am I really an artist? You question yourself a lot of times, like, well, what am I doing? And then you start realizing like all the things that are actually in place, the exhibitions, then like doing this drag thing. Like, I wasn't necessarily intimidated by it, but I was just like, I want to do it right. So it's very fascinating to be reminded and honestly like put in perspective that yes, I am an artist, I guess, And
I have your work.
Yeah.
I have 4 of your prints hanging in my space over here. They've been shown, I think, at least 3 times in 3 different shows. So
yeah,
for over a span of like 2 years, I think at least, or I don't know, I can't even remember. Because you were part of the original, weren't you part of Existimos, the first show we did?
I was.
And then, and I know those prints are in the portfolio. And then you did another show, which I think was last summer's show, which was Dissidencia.
Yes.
I mean, you participated in a lot of shows here because we love your work, and you're an artist, definitely. Like, I mean, your work gets a lot of attention. I mean, it's very well received here. So you have a home in Mexico when you come. So
I'm super excited. I actually just got my passport renewal, so like I'm actually going to use it this time. I actually haven't left the country. I got it and never left. But now I want, like, my goal is to finally, I have a little bit more flexibility with money now with bartending, which is really, it's kind of unfortunate, like, that being a professor doesn't pay that much, but like the bartending is like, that's what's really giving me the opportunity to kind of leave. But I will say though, being in a gay bar and like, it is absolutely where I need to be in addition to teaching. It's just like being so involved in the gay community and in so many different ways. It's very fun. And then like going into the classroom and seeing all the queer babies come in, and I love being able to kind of like, oh no, I'm also queer. Make sure that I'm handing this off to you to give you strength, and like, here's the baton. Have fun. Be you. It's great. I don't know.
You have somebody who did that for you when you started as an artist?
Not really, honestly. I definitely think that my peers just in like when I showed them different pieces of like works or even just images, and I think when I first started working on like my queer work specifically, I had a bunch of images that I was just like, I don't know what to do with these. Like, and it really resisted trying to be the queer artist, because I wanted to be an artist and queer, but I didn't necessarily have to do them to make me feel successful. At least that's what I was telling myself. And the reality is, once I gave into it, like, I realized this is exactly where I needed to be, and it's exactly what I wanted to do. And I think the reality is queer people are always taught to be more palatable to the hetero world. um, and I think the reason why I didn't want to be the queer artist was because I was trying to be palatable, trying to make everyone else feel comfortable, even specifically my parents. Like, my parents aren't very comfortable with my queer identity. I didn't invite them to my MFA thesis, or they've never come to any of my shows that have involved my queer work, because my mom has called it pornographic at times. So, yeah.
I think there's an element of sexuality to it, but I definitely don't think it's pornographic. I mean,
Right. And I definitely skirt the edge a little bit sometimes. But it's purposeful. I mean, the reality is like the sexuality as queer people, we have navigated it so differently because of how many things that we've had to put up, like how many guards and things that have been told us, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't this. I mean, even in 1993, I was talking to someone. 1993, it was still illegal for you to be gay in Texas. You could be arrested. And I was alive at this point, like, and people, I mean, granted, I'm in my 30s now, but like, you think about it, that's not that long ago, maybe 30 years, but there are so many things that we're dealing with. And like here in the US, like, we have a lot of laws that are banning drag, which in my opinion is more pointed toward trans identities and trans people, more specifically than just drag. But it's unfortunate that we're having to take some steps back in how much more progress that we have gotten, it's
I mean, that's the history, though. That's two step forwards, one step back, and
Mhm.
I think definitely. I mean, I'm 53, so I came out in the 80s, and
Mhm.
I know that we made a lot of progress, but I've seen that sort of advancement and retraction, advance, retract. So I definitely feel like the community is in a much better place than it has been, but the rise of fascism, even within the United States, and how the Republican Party has become sort of a fascist stronghold, that's a very dangerous thing for our community. And people, I worry because people have become so comfortable with their privileges that they don't understand how easily they're taken away, and camps become, the norm again, or, and
Right.
it's that slow boil, like you put a frog into water, like just tepid water. You put a frog in, it doesn't respond. You raise the temperature slowly, and the frog boils to death. The frog
Right.
never knows. It's the same thing with fascism. That's how fascism works. That's how it roots itself. And so I see that. No, we have to fight. We need to fight more. We need to be more visible. We need to be unapologetic and just be who we are.
Mhm.
In the queer spectrum, how do you identify? What is your identifier?
So, like, over the last few years, like, I've gone between being fully feeling like I'm non-binary, or feeling like I definitely identify as a male. I ultimately have concluded that I am a male, but I definitely am male-ish more so than not, because a lot of the tendencies that are put in the expectations of being a man are ridiculous, and I do not like to follow. I also am very uncomfortable with the terms Mr., Sir, like, even titles of power. Like, even in my classroom, I don't like students calling me professor either, because I feel like there's an expectation for me to be here. I'm the grade giver.
Well, and you're the bearer of all knowledge, and that's also like a binary concept. So
Yeah.
actually, like, we learn and it's exchange, and it's like, oh, if I put a student into a position where they draw up a question and I don't know the answer, then we get to discover it together. But if you're a professor in the binary sense,
Mm.
conversation is closed. It's like you're the knowledge and they're the receiver.
Right. And it's very weird and strange because I'm like, I'm not the end all be all. And not only that, like with me, like I identify as like a homosexual male ish, like, and there's so many nuances to it now, like realizing like, um, I'm attracted to men and men of all different flavors and all different colors. It's nice to actually kind of like realize that like I can lean into it and still explore who I am through it all. Because one thing that like I've learned over the time is our identity is never going to be set in stone 100% when it comes to sexuality and our queerness. It's always going to evolve. It's always going to change. And that makes it kind of exciting in some ways because like you're just like, all right, what the next 5 years going to change, you know? What am I going to add to this? And it's one of the things that's encouraging, and that why I always try and remind people, you know, when they get really annoyed with like adding more letters to LGBTQ, or like when they get annoyed with, well, they them is plural and I don't want to deal. I'm like, but we didn't have the language and we weren't trying to give definition to these things, and now we have, and now we're putting effort into doing it. At least, you know, we're giving more nuance to our identity. We're not trying to just like separate people into different categories. We're trying to make them feel included within the category. It's like giving, like in sports teams, for a very like very weird reference, but sports teams a lot of times give every player a nickname. You know, you're the help, you're the challenge, you're the da da da, whatever, the macho man. But everyone gets these weird nicknames, and if we all find these names, these places that we have, and within our queer identities, we all have a place here in the queer community, because we are allowing all this language to evolve and to become more inclusive. And it's exciting to see that we can do that, and that art is a way to also do that. So I don't know.
I mean, let's segue that into your art then, because there's a definite like viewpoint within your art that I appreciate, which is sort of a body positivity. Positivity. I think the bodies that you depict in your artwork are not the bodies that we typically see. We typically see more like, you know, the muscle, skinny twink or whatever, hairless and blah blah blah. All these different.
Right.
Talk about how your art is sort of an expression of your queerness as well.
Well, specifically, like even with my excuse me, the frolicking series that like I've done just as my self-portraiture series, that was a big step for me to like looking at my body and appreciating it. You know, as media tells us, bigger bodies aren't beautiful. We are reinforced in so many ways, like even in certain situations like Queer Eye, like where it's like a very queer forward show. You have our fashion guru Tan using constant language like it's slimming. You want to not feel big. You want to not feel, you know. And I don't think he realizes that these terms are microaggressions towards bigger people of size. And the reality is he's not trying to do that. But we need to unlearn a lot of these things that have been put in our mind. I personally don't want to look slimmer. Like, that's not my goal. My goal is just to be me and exist and love who I am. And that's one of the things where I want to take these random situations. Sometimes I am dancing. Sometimes I'm doing a cartwheel. And I want people to be able to be like, oh, it's not a surprise that a chubby person can do this. It's fun that they can enjoy themselves. Like, we can enjoy living in our bodies no matter what we have.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that specific series. the frolicking series, because that was back in the pandemic.
Mhm.
And I remember we had talked about this before, because it was like this moment where you could like, you specifically could be in places nude, and because there was no one around to judge, it gave this sort of freedom to like explore. And
Yeah.
then what came from that? What came from frolicking and that experience of doing that for you?
I mean, for me, it has just given me even more confidence in some ways. Um, for me, specifically for my mental health and a lot of things. And granted, I know that a lot of people enjoy the series as well. So I think for me, it's like it's been a fun experience to share this experience with other people too, because they see the joy, they see the happiness that I'm trying to create, from ups and downs of really high excitement to calm moments, like even just reading a book sometimes. And for me, I very much enjoy uh living in my body. I don't know. It's kind of it's a very fun thing, and sometimes like I will stand at the bar for 14 hours a day, and like I definitely felt it this morning. I was like, ooh, my legs are a little sore. So like sometimes you can feel like when you abuse your body a little bit, but like at the same time, it's just like there are so many different bodies and so many different people that don't have the validation that I have in mine. And I want to be able to give them courage to look at their body and honestly say, I love my body, and I'm going to change it into the ways that I want better, like, because even me, there are days that I don't 100% love everything that I see, and sometimes it's the haircut. Sometimes I'm like, I want a tattoo. And other times it's just like, well, maybe I could lose a few pounds and maybe not. And only a lot of times, whenever I feel like anything has to do with weight, I want to make sure that it's coming from a place of like health decisions. It's not coming from a societal expectation,
Well, it's
because
not just physical health, it's mental health as well. So, I mean, it becomes like this question of, I don't know. I mean, there were many years when I'd have mirrors everywhere, but I never looked at myself in the mirror,
mm,
because I don't feel as though I match that sort of ideal of what beauty is. And
mm,
so I've been trained to not look in the mirror and not see myself, or to see only small parts of myself and ignore the rest. And it's amazing what the mind will tolerate. And it's your
mm,
body. I mean, we live in our body. We live in it.
right,
So the fact that, it's like, of course, 14 hours standing, you're going to feel that the next day, but also like, that day on the beach, it's like, how do we clarify or make space for ourselves to feel safe, in the world. It's very easy, and it's easier in your home. It's
right,
easy in a bar where the theme of it is going to be more about acceptance, but then you go out into the broader public and it becomes even more vulnerable, and
right.
that's what I think is, I don't, there's a sense of humor in your work, but it's like you, especially in the second series that we presented last year. I don't remember the name of the series.
My bearish life.
Yes. In that particular series, I thought what was really interesting was there's this vulnerability to it, but it's not what's forward in the images. It's just like, no, here we are. There's no titles. There's no defining good or bad. It's just, here we are. We exist and we're having fun and we're loving.
Mm,
Uh, so that's what I really appreciate about that Bears Life series too. It's like that felt like a progression from the first series of the isolation of the pandemic, allowing you to frolic
mm,
and be in spaces, to
right.
these spaces where the freedom is just, it just
Mhm.
exists. It takes space.
Right. Well, and when I started, like my bearish life has been like it's been a long ongoing series, to be honest. and it is the way that I've taken photos has very much evolved and focused in on the images. And I feel like initially I wanted to kind of do like an overview of the bear community, and like it hadn't come into like my bearish life at this point. It was just like, bears, cool, chubby boys, I like, we're all, great. But for me, I wanted to definitely tell it from my perspective and kind of like nail that in very hard, because my life isn't the typical of a lot of people's life, but also I like a lot of these people that I'm taking photographs, like I'm very good friends, like they're very close to me. They are people that like are really good friends. And of course, some of them I've been intimate with, like in multiple different ways, and I think there's like something that like I started finding within like being close to the people that I photograph, allows me to kind of just like get into these spaces that you wouldn't normally necessarily photograph or get into unless you didn't have that closeness. And it's always interesting to me that people, oftentimes I'll get a few people that'll say, I would love to pose for you, I would love to be part of your work. And I'm like, all right, well then let's get to know each other first. Like for me, let's have a little bit more of just like, ooh, you're gonna pose for me. Because my images don't come from just I've always considered myself more of an artist than a photographer. Like camera is my medium, and it's much easier for me to like use it in art than it is just as being a freelance photographer. Most of the time when you get photography jobs, it becomes a chore, it becomes hectic, and if you don't do it correctly, you get so much more criticized. And making something that I love into a chore is not the gig. So I prefer to do it on a more intimate level. I would love to spend time with I do love it when my friends are like, hey, let's have fun, so you can bring your camera out and we'll just have fun and be silly. And that's where these moments come from, or when they are just as excited about this collaboration. And so, I don't know.
Interesting, because negotiating intimacy with a camera is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, from the perspective and from the whoever's modeling or you're shooting, I mean, that ideal of presenting intimacy, moments of intimacy, and negotiating that with your models, and like dissolving the camera, the of the camera within a scene requires so much like a dynamic, and you as the artist have to create that space for it too. So
right,
speaks very highly to you as a friend and like a member of your community that there's enough trust there for people to explore these things with you. Have you had any negative responses to the work, or no?
Well, I think initially when I was doing the overview, some people, and granted, when people told me this, I was like, no, you're wrong. They called it voyeuristic in ways. And I was like, no, I know these people, I know the majority of them. And granted, I think what I realized when I look at the work now, because when I really started focusing on it was in 2016, and I look at the work from back then to now, and I see it now. I see what they're saying, because there's a distance and a connection that I didn't have to these people in the same way that I do to my stuff now. And again, it's that intimacy and that I have with these people now. Like I very much pretty much have cut out all the acquaintances or even like somewhat good friends. Like most of those images have been kind of like washed out at this point. Mainly again because of the fact that like there's a certain level of intimacy that you can see in those ones, in these new images, that you don't see in the old ones. And what I do find funny is like some of these people that I have taken images of. Some of them I didn't know, like really at all. And then I'm like, wait a minute, now I know remember you from, and I'd show them images from the situation. I'm like, I knew you back then. And part of me realizes that's the voyeurism. I didn't really know who you were. And now, like, it's fun to kind of see these moments, like, remind myself I'm full circle a little bit.
Yeah, but it's voyeurism with consent, though, because I think
Right.
sometimes people use the word voyeurism. They imagine like somebody in a bush, like jacking off or something, and staring at, or people doing something on a bus or something.
Right.
Exhibition, voyeurism, like these things are not. I mean, they're. It's different when there's consent and there's even a minor relationship. Like the decision is being made. There's a buildup, and so I doubt that there was a negativity to those experiences for the models as well.
Right.
And so I think it's an interesting thing when people say that. I think it actually just reveals their discomfort with the subject matter more than.
Yeah. And granted, I think it's very interesting to me because, like, I've had different critiques from different artists, like people like in grad school, or when like you have this opportunity to go like, hey, let's have this critique thrown down. I find it very interesting. Like, you can tell who's just not comfortable with it, and it's strange, honestly. Like, I feel like there's so much more. There is work that is even more hypersexual for me, like in the queer spectrum that I've seen, and I love it. I mean, I'm all for it, but that's because in my mind, queer identities and queer culture is normal for me. And so to see people kind of recoil at queerness at sometimes is weird. I don't understand. Even if they're like,
I always say the word weird means spiritually charged. So I don't think there's anything wrong with weird. I think discomfort is really, really important, especially in a culture like the United States, where comfort is an entitlement to people as well. It's like, because all mainstream media is so whitewashed and so purified by the religious standards of the country. And so people expect to be comfortable. I mean, I see that a lot in Mexico when people, with tourists, they come and they want that same level of comfort that they're entitled to in the United States, and they don't get it here, and then they respond in different ways. But like with art, for instance, Mapplethorpe is a very good example, because I saw the Mapplethorpe show in 1990-91 in Cincinnati that basically ended and restructured the whole National Endowment for the Arts grants program. But then I got to see his retrospective at LACMA. I think this was like 6-7 years ago at LACMA, and it was very interesting to me to see, because in 90-91, everything that was scandalous, and then you see all these people with their kids like walking through like this exhibit, and the Maple. And so it was it was very interesting to have this this time frame of like 20-30 years where the queer aesthetic has become so much a part of mainstream as well.
Yeah, it is. It's very nice to honestly see acceptance, I guess, in that way. Like, I personally, like, from my personal experience and like from my familial experience, like, it is unfortunate that like some people still have to experience rejection from their families, even if it's not like 100%, I'm kicking you out, I don't want to talk to you again. Like, there is a certain amount of like, you just want to hear your parents say like, I'm okay with you being gay, I love you, and like in fact, I support your gayness, like, they don't necessarily have to be be at the photo shoot where I'm naked, doing that. Like, I don't need a photo assistant with them, but it would be nice to be like, Adam, you're doing good things for people, and I don't get that from my family. And I've become accustomed to it. I'm essentially okay with it. I think a big part of one of the things that like I had to let go of it in order for me to kind of continue to flourish as a queer person, to be unapologetic. Like in the ways that I can be unapologetic, I do have to leave them behind. And for me, it is liberating, I guess, because I feel like a lot of times I put myself in a cage, like, well, one day, maybe, I hope my parents can get to this. But, you know, the reality is they may never do it. And you know what? Oh, well. I have people, again, you look at these images of the people in them, those people, those are my family. Those are the people that care for me. And I care for them, vice versa. So it's just, I don't know, it's great.
Beautiful. I mean, that is the story of the queer community. It is these natal families and chosen families are the way that we survive, and then we can set standards for ourselves about what it is that we need. We better understand ourselves through the artwork that we make, and then we express that and we draw more people into our family this way. This is the history of queer art and artists, right?
Right.
So lucky to have community.
It is. I mean, even if like, I think one of the fun things is just seeing all the different aspects of it too. Because like later today, I'm going to go get some wood pieces to create some paintings with my friend. Her name is Beth. She works at UMBC, and her and I went to grad school together. And like, I have friends from all different aspects of life here. Like, I'm also on the kickball team here in Baltimore. Like, we're in the kickball league. So like now I get to see these people and like people that I wouldn't normally like associate with, I guess, in some ways. Like, it's just, there's so many things that like when you learn to just kind of break out your normal circle and find people, there's so many great people, there's so many great queer people, and then there are people that are struggling and there are people that are succeeding, and to kind of see glimpses of both and be part of that, and to either encourage or to help or be a support system for them, it's really exciting for me. I don't know, I care so much about people not getting the experience that I had. I went through all of grad school without having an openly queer educator, you know, like, and this is even at Micah, like at an art school. And this was in 2017. Like, I didn't have an openly queer educator. So I was like, well, that's going to be me. And I even teach at the Baltimore School for the Arts, which is a high school. And I teach about ACT UP. I teach about AIDS and like a lot of the queer movements. And it's so refreshing to see like them be, oh, some of them know about it before me coming into it. And it is nice to see that. And it's great that it's not new knowledge, but I also don't mind it being new knowledge, because I'd rather them hear it at a younger age than be shadowed from it like until undergrad or afterwards. Like, I didn't know any of this happened, and like until I started like Googling it myself, you know. And even Google was much more restrictive back then.
My
So
generation, we didn't have Google. We had community. We had bars.
right.
When I came out of the closet in 88, 87, 88, that was in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. That was, people were dying everywhere. And so the community that I had was disappearing in front of me. And so we were political, we were ACT UP, we were marching, we were screaming, and things changed, and technology has allowed us to connect as well. And so ideals disseminate in a very different way now. So I think that also puts us in a position of power, but it also makes us vulnerable.
Absolutely.
It means that we can express ourselves, but it also means that, we're turned inside out in some situations and we feel raw.
Right.
And that's the experience. That is,
Right.
it's a constant negotiation. I live in a major metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world, and have my nails painted, and people stare at me, or they give me this look like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
There's a long way to go. There's a long way to go.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, even I have my toenails are painted. People, like, I see people, and I'm like, what is happening? They're like, you look like you have licorice jelly beans. And I'm like, oh, that's one way of saying it.
I love that. Thank you. Like to lick.
Right. I'm like, I don't recommend licking him, but it's fine.
Well, I mean, if you're, you have your passport, and if you're planning to come, let me know in advance, and let's see what we can do, because I think I would love to mount a solo show with you here. So your work has been very well received in Mexico City. You have a community waiting for you here, and I hope you'll continue sharing with me when new work comes, so that I can stay updated on what's happening with your work. It's not easy in terms of like curating a gallery. It's like I have all these people, and I see your work every day in my home, and I don't, turn, find out what's going on, So please let me know how you're doing and what's happening, so we could share it with our community too.
Absolutely. It is amazing how much time passes, how quickly it passes.
It's our fourth queer show this year.
Yeah.
I'm just like, has it really been 4 years? I mean, in some ways, I think because of the pandemic, it felt like 20 years. But then also, wait, what happened? Where are we? Wait, it's another, wait.
Right. Well, like, because my roommate, she's also a curator. She graduated from Micah as well. And like, I also was driving down the street the other day, and commencement at Micah was happening, and just a bunch of graduates just ran across the street. And I was like, I'm going to hit, like, you guys need to look where you're going. But also it made me realize, I'm like, wow, it's been 6 years since I got my MFA, and when I was one of those people. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, in such a good way. Like, I love it. The chaos.
They have you as a teacher, that you're in the community, expressing yourself and finding your own voice in that community as well. So,
well, and this is the first class that graduated at Micah that I had part teaching in too. So it was like only a few of my students stayed at Micah, because I started in spring of 2020, so it was like right when the pandemic started. So only a few of them were actually able to stay at Micah. But it's ridiculous to think like the paths that we go on, and to think that like the people that you actually do touch and connect with. It is fun to see. I get emails every so often, not every day and not every month, but like every couple months, from a student that's like, hey, I was thinking about you today, and I saw this artwork, and I thought you might like it because it reminded me of yours. Or and I do that to some students as well. But like, it's interesting when it comes back to my direction, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. There's only like opportunity out there. And I think one of the things that I would encourage people, like when you come out of school, when you come out of like hard situations, you're like, oh man, I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting shows. I'm not getting residencies. I'm not doing this. Keep going. It's hard sometimes, but like the reality is if I hadn't kept pushing through those from 2017, honestly, till like right about 2020, like it was about 3 years before I had more than 3 exhibitions in that entire like span. And those exhibitions, 2 of them were in coffee shops. And so so you think like, oh man, is this really like I just spent all this money on grad school and everything, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and then all of a sudden it just starts falling into place. Things you start seeing your hard work pay off because you didn't stop when it was hard.
Momentum is very important. Momentum
Yeah.
is hugely, hugely important and very difficult to regain. So a discipline around is really important. Do you have I know you have all these things going on. You have like a self-imposed discipline about your work, or is it you just let it flow as it comes into your mind, or are you like a every day I'm going to touch my camera, or like what is your discipline?
Well, my biggest discipline is trying to make work while I'm traveling, which sounds a little ridiculous. Because a big part of like making work outside of my normal area to me is what's fun in some ways, because I get to do it in an environment that I'm not familiar with. So therefore it gives me a little bit more of that kind of emotion in a sense. Also, I get to write it off on taxes. But there's that kind of motivation. But then for me, I think otherwise, I definitely just like surrounding myself by creative people. And I guess initially it was intentional, but like at this point, it's just my life. Like I live with two other professors, and an international exhibiting artist named Kei Ito, and like we're all just like really tight knit family. And then like all the people that like I got in like paths collided with like a person that runs a gallery in Still Point, and he's like, "Oh, I want you to do this," and I'm just like, now we are all friends, and it's because of the fact that like my connections sometimes come from working at the bar. I ran into a curator from New York who wanted me to do stuff too, and it's just like to me it's so much fun that I keep like. For me, I want to try and make at least a few images a month. And even if I don't like them, like take a moment or an hour or two to make them. Every photo conference I go to, I actually try and make an image as well because I find it funny. Because the CPAP one where I was jumping, that was like that habit came from doing that, and it is a moment of like, okay, let's take a step back from the conference. I need a moment to breathe. I mean, the last conference, I ended up having a kidney stone. So I had to pass the kidney stone. And then I was like, well, time to take photos because I need to get away from that situation. But I did.
Pain and drama to make art. Like I'm always like, if I'm suffering, it's the time to make art. Like you need like an outlet to like, or if I'm bored or something like that, it's like, oh no, this is the moment I got to trigger myself into action. So
absolutely.
Adam, I am so appreciative of you and taking the time to meet with me today and talk about your work. I am genuinely sincere about presenting your work. So, always keep in contact with me. I would love to have you here in the gallery. I think you would do so well, and I'd love to have you come and create some work here in Mexico City too. And that's an open invitation. So,
I will definitely, once that passport comes into play, and like, that's one good thing about being an educator is summertime. It's just like, all right, that's playtime. That's when I can go, and it's not even restrictive to like a weekend, which is nice. You can go for a week or two or however many times, and I am working at the bar. Like I also can take a month off. They allow. I asked them about this. I was like, what if I get a residency? Is that okay for me to like? So it's exciting for me, and life is offering opportunities. And I think the thing is I just got to keep going. I'm running with this momentum. I don't want it to leave me behind. So, and I'm in my 30s. So like the reality is like, I just have much more opportunity to keep going with it. And I just want to elevate queer people. That's ultimately what I'm doing. Making sure that they're visible, making sure that they feel loved, making sure that they have a voice. And that's my ultimate goal, whether it's through my art, whether it's through teaching, whether it's at the bar, listening to their bad days or whatnot. It's fun for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Your work is beautiful. And I'm honored to work with you. So, and to have you as a part of our community here, the worldwide community and things. And I will continue to reach out to you, and I hope you do the same.
Oh, absolutely.
Please share things that are happening, and if you have openings and things, I'll be happy to send it out to our network as well. So we do have artists in your area that we work with too, not like in Baltimore, but around that area. So
there's a few of them that I know, like what's his name? Stephen Baboon?
Yeah, Stephen. Oh, I love Stephen. He's amazing.
He was on the Pride Caucus for SPE with me. So like yeah, it's so funny because like I was like, oh, I know that person. I know that person. So
that's interesting because there's similarities in the way you guys work as well. So I could imagine a very easy collaboration. He's so busy, like he is really busy now. He's become very. I mean, he's worked very hard for everything that he has. So, so I think it's interesting how to see all these developments and things too. I love seeing the queer community rise up and make headway in different ways. So,